Hi everybody. Tonight we're going to do Module 4, Lesson 7, and we're going to be working on multiplying any whole number by a fraction, and we're going to use tape diagrams. So yesterday we were multiplying whole numbers by a fraction, but we were multiplying pretty small whole numbers that were easy to model with arrays. And today we're going to move on to larger numbers that are a little bit inconvenient for using arrays, so we're going to move into a tape diagram model instead. Our first problem is, what is 3/5 of 35? And I'm going to just quickly review the way we did it last night. So I've got an array of 35 circles, and I noticed that my denominator was 5, so I have created my array, so it would be easy to make 5 groups. And the way we practiced this last night was we took a look at 35 over 5. Started out with that, which is the same as 35 divided by 5. And that's going to equal 7. And that is how many dots are in each one of our groups. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then to find, that's how we found what 1/5 was. In order to find out what 3/5 is, then we have to take that 7 and multiply it by 3. And we show that down here by putting 3 groups together, and 7 times 3, of course, is 21. So if we counted by 7s, it would be 7, 14, 21. As you can see, as we move into the larger numbers, it's a little bit cumbersome to use dots and arrays. So now's the time to switch over to the tape diagram. So here is our tape diagram. We are still trying to find 3/5 of 35. And we discussed this in class, and we talked about whenever we see this word of involving a fraction, it means we're actually multiplying 3/5 times 35. Now, this is a little bit unusual. When you're working with fractions, we've got a multiplication sign here, but as far as the tape diagram goes, it's a little different than what we've seen before because we actually know the whole. In the past, when we've multiplied with just whole numbers, and even with decimals, in multiplication we didn't know the whole. We knew the parts and how many parts we had and had to figure out the whole. Now that we are working with fractions, the rules have changed a little bit. So 35 is going to be our whole, and we have to find 3/5 of that, which means that we have to divide our whole into 5 pieces. And did you hear me say the word divide? That is exactly why when we're multiplying by a fraction, the rules are different, because fractions are really division problems. So the tape diagram is going to start out looking like the tape diagram for a division problem. So I have marked off my 5 parts of my whole, and I know that 35 divided by 5 is going to equal 7. That is an equal sign. So there are 7 parts, 7 in each of my parts. 35 divided by 5 equals 7. Okay, now we have to take into account the numerator, and that means that I want to know how many are in 3/5. I know that 7 is in each fifth. Now I want to know, if I take 3/5, how many will there be? Well, obviously that means we have to do a second part. So we have 7, and we have 3 parts with 7 in them, so 7 times 3 equals 21. So 3/5 of 35 is 21. So as you can see, the rules we followed for tape diagrams before still apply, but it's a little more complicated because a fraction is really a division problem. And if you have a unit fraction, like 1/5, it's just a straight ahead division problem. But if you have a non-unit fraction, then suddenly you have a two-step problem where first you have to divide to figure out how many are in each part. That would be the 7s here. And then you have to multiply to find out how many are in the number of parts that you're interested in. Okay, here's our first quiz question. Aurelia buys 2 dozen roses, and for those of you who may have forgotten, there are 12 in a dozen, and she's got 2 dozen, so you're going to have to do some math before you even start. Of these roses, 2/3 are red and the rest are white. How many white roses did she buy? Now this problem is a little bit different than the one that we just did, in that they're not asking about this. They're not asking how many are red. They're asking about how many are white. So on your scratch paper, I'd like you to draw a tape diagram, figure out what is the whole, and you're going to have to do a little math to figure out even what the whole is. Then you're going to figure out how many are in each part. We're using thirds here. And our question is not about 2/3, but the part that is not 2/3. So do your best. Okay, here's our next quiz question. Rosie had 17 yards of fabric. She used 1/3 of it to make a quilt. How many yards of fabric did Rosie use to make the quilt? This one is actually a little more straightforward than the last one, but I want you to take a look and notice that there's our whole, there's our part, and 3 is not a factor of 17. So that means the only thing that will be different about this answer is it's going to be a mixed number. Here's the last type of problem that we're going to do today. 2/3 of a number is 8. What is the number? This problem is a little bit different because we do not know the whole. Don't be confused by this. The number is 8. That's not the whole. Our job here is to figure out what the whole is. We know that our tape diagram is going to be divided into thirds, and we know that 2 of those thirds is going to be 8. So now our job is to figure out what is the number that we started with. So I know that if right here I have an 8 and there are 2 equal parts that make 8. So this is actually 8 divided by 2, or 8/2, and 8/2 is the same as 4. So I know that there are 4 in each of these parts, and since this is a fraction, I know there has to be 4 in the third part as well. And once I know that, I should write that down here, 8/2 equals 4. Since I know that, the last part of solving this is looking at 1, 2, 3, times 4. And what does that equal? That equals 12. So I can cross out that question mark, and I know that 12 is my answer. So this is the other thing that's a little odd, because since we're working with fractions, everything's kind of topsy-turvy. In this fraction, we needed to find out the whole, so we actually did some multiplication down here. And we did a little bit of division in the beginning to find out how much was in each part. But the big thing we did was the multiplication at the end. Okay, this quiz question is very similar to the problem that I just showed you. Tiffany spent 4/7 of her money on a teddy bear. If the teddy bear cost $24, how much money did she have at first? The money she had at first is the whole. That's what we're trying to find out. We know how much she spent, and that was 4/7 of her money. So these last two problems, this quiz problem and the one I just showed you, are really kind of what we were doing in the beginning, only we're doing things backwards, because instead of trying to find a part, we're trying to find the whole. Do your best on the quiz. We'll see how you do, and I'll see you tomorrow in class.